guys, so I'm sitting in the back with the cameras so that I can try to get the best vantage point, but we're not quite sure how long this will take. So maybe what I can do is just take you through what's happened through the day while we're waiting, and then maybe start the whole thing again post, right? So one of the things that's happened is that there have been several different panels. Governments have come together with journalists, with civic engagement, with groups that are actually doing civic engagement. One of the key is the formation of what Luminate has said could be up to $1 billion fund, and that would be to support independent journalism around the world. Right now, they have roughly $500,000 for it. The second panel that I was on, actually it wasn't a panel, it was a meeting of the Information and Democracy Commission, and there you had this initiative where 25 people from 18 different countries, and they're from journalists, academics, a Nobel laureate. It's chaired by Shirin Ebadi, who's won the Nobel Prize for her work in Iran. She is now living in exile. And then Christophe Deloy, who is the Secretary General of the RSF, Reporters Without Borders. It is also, people like Aidan White from the Ethical Journalism Network, and other authors of books looking at this information right now, tech people. Okay, it's looking like we may start. Let me flip this around so you can see how crazy it is here.
It's seducing to think that, on the internet, a lot of people, I feel like today, the media freedom is really being attacked. Again.
The role of the journalist in society is fundamental. Without journalism, free, fair, and independent, you cannot have a strong civil society.
An assault on free media, an assault on media.
When that rocket-propelled grenade. Today we are living in times of fake news, post-truth, and over-information. Once you can distinguish what's real and what's fake, the truth soon becomes relative. Who benefits from this? Populists, autocrats, and dictators. That's why we need free, independent, and reliable media.
These numbers are huge. It's really sending a clear message.
La libertad de prensa, la libertad de expresión, parte de un derecho esencial, una garantía de los ciudadanos de la humanidad.
There's places where if you say certain things, you'll get thrown in prison for it.
Worldwide, 2018 was the hardest year for the media organizations. Up to 1,000 journalists were killed in the last decade.
El 10 de noviembre del año 2018 fue el día que llegaron a secuestrarme.
Media freedom became important to me in 1994, immediately after the genocide.
The retired colonel gave the order for the killings to begin.
53 journalists were killed because they opposed the genocide.
Me enchacharon, no me leyeron mis derechos, me tiraron a la paila del vehículo, me golpearon la columna.
Uno de los principales obstáculos que tenemos para ejercer la libertad de prensa y la libertad de expresión es la ausencia de un Estado de Derecho.
Estoy judicializado.
So when one journalist is attacked, it's not just about that journalist. It's about what the entire ecosystem will be able to sustain. How many people will put their lives at risk in that way?
It's more important than ever that governments not only allow free media to exist, but that actively encourage their freedom.
For a society to be democratic and to function well, for it to deal with corruption, for it to support the rule of law, there needs to be the free flow of information and content, discussion and debate on whatever platforms that takes place.
World leaders attending this conference, what you say to the media, what you say to journalists matters.
Don't be quiet. Do not keep quiet, speak out.
You should use your power as the authority of the government to interfere or maybe pressure the government that doing something that is wrong to the journalists.
In order to support media freedom, governments, NGOs, and civil society should create more opportunities for media organizations to collaborate, give them access to information and resources, and most importantly, guarantee safety of the journalists.
the role of the journalist is as important as the other pillars of any democracy.
The information environment in which we all depend on is threatened when journalists are attacked.
Pero gracias a Dios, estoy vivo, contándole a ustedes.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chrystia Freeland. I'm the Foreign Minister of Canada, and I'm delighted to be with you here today as co-host of the first global conference on media freedom. And I would like to start by thanking the British government and my friend, Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, for the tremendous organization of this conference, for having the idea of holding it in the first place, and for welcoming us all to London. And you even organized really good weather. Je suis très heureuse de me joindre à vous aujourd'hui. Permettez-moi de souligner le bon travail que vous faites pour faire progresser les droits de la personne à travers le monde, pour encourager les gens à parler de ce sujet important et pour exiger des changements. Il s'agit d'un enjeu très important pour le Canada, parce que nous comprenons à quel point la liberté d'expression et de la presse sont pierres angulaires de notre démocratie. Lorsque les droits de la personne sont protégés, les gouvernements sont plus raisonnables et la qualité de vie des gens s'améliore. So, I am now a politician, but my first job in life was as a journalist. And my career as a journalist began in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And I studied and worked in what was first the Soviet Union, and while I was living there, became the former Soviet Union. That experience of watching from the inside as this vast, mighty, authoritarian regime crumbled profoundly shaped my thinking about democracy and about the importance of the brave journalists who helped create democracy in those times. Journalists hold governments accountable, knowing that we will face scrutiny and questions, that we, as political leaders, are not going to be grading our own work, makes us much better than we would otherwise be, even if we don't always feel that way in the throes of particularly heated press conferences. Transparency builds citizens' faith and confidence in their governments and in democracy. That's why journalists must have the ability to report facts freely and to defend, expose, and advance the truth without fear of retaliation, reprisal, violence, or imprisonment. Today, journalism is difficult and dangerous work. UNESCO reports that last year alone, 99 members of the media were killed around the world. And by the end of last year, Reporters Without Frontiers says 348 journalists were in prison. In fact, the 4 deadliest recorded years for journalists have occurred within the past decade. Some cases have captured international attention in recent months, like the gruesome murder of journalist Amal Clooney, the illegal detention by Russia of Ukrainian writer and filmmaker Sentsov, and the harassment and intimidation of Philippine journalist and activist Maria Ressa. On occasion, our efforts to defend the world's brave journalists are successful. Reuters reporters Walon and Kwasuru, who were detained in Myanmar for daring to report on the horrific genocide being committed against the Rohingya, were released in early May. In Russia, questionable charges against journalist Ivan Vololon were dropped after pressure from journalists in that country itself, and he was subsequently set free. These instances are a reminder that when we work together, when we speak out together, we can make a difference. Democracy is not just about elections, and it's not just about politicians. It is about a much broader set of institutions, including a vibrant and vocal civil society and a free and independent media. We need to speak up for those who are persecuted for doing their job, even when we are told that matters such as these should only be raised in private, and even when speaking out brings consequences. Rest assured that Canada will always defend press freedom. I'm particularly thankful to everyone who is here for the work you do as journalists, as defenders of journalists around the world. Thank you for your commitment. Okay, now I'm going to move to my Master of Ceremonies duties, and I'm going to start by introducing my fellow speakers. The first is actually a woman who needs no introduction. He played an instrumental
Today, journalists are under attack like never before. They are dying not only while covering wars, but because they are exposing crimes committed in war, exposing abuses of power committed in peacetime. In the last 18 months, over 100 journalists and media workers have been killed. India and Brazil, two of the world's largest democracies, have some of the highest murder rates. The vast majority of these murders go unpunished. And last year, when Amal Clooney, Washington Post columnist, was tortured to death and dismembered by Saudi Arabian officials in Istanbul, world leaders responded with little more than a collective shrug. Journalists are also being jailed in record numbers, with the highest rates reported in Turkey, China, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. I am a witness in my legal practice to the challenges faced by journalists. I've represented journalists targeted by their governments for reporting corruption and human rights abuse from Azerbaijan to the Maldives to Cairo, and my foundation's Trial Watch initiative monitors the prosecution of journalists all over the world. Over the past year, I have also spent hundreds of hours working on the defense of Reuters journalists Wallone and Chassaou, heroic young reporters imprisoned in Myanmar for violating the Official Secrets Act, after they wrote an article about the execution of 10 Rohingya men by Myanmar security forces. The government's treatment of these journalists is so outrageous, it's actually hard to believe. The phone rings in the Reuters office one evening. The police asks the journalists to meet at a cafe. When they walk into the cafe, they're handed rolled up documents. When they walk out of the cafe, they're arrested for espionage. When they were imprisoned, the police didn't even bother to pretend they were interested in supposedly secret documents they were carrying. Instead, they were asked about the sources for that Rohingya report, and they offered to drop the charges if Reuters were to drop the story. When that offer was refused, they were put on trial. and then something extraordinary happened in the courtroom. A police officer called by the prosecution to testify against them confessed that the journalist's arrest was a setup. But the judges convicted them anyway, and they were sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. It took over a year to secure a pardon for the Reuters journalists, but on the 6th of May, they walked out of the prison gates to be reunited with their wives and baby daughters, one of whom, baby Angel, was born while her father was in prison. And 6 weeks ago, they went to New York because they were awarded the Pulitzer Prize for that Rohingya report. More recently, I have been appointed as counsel for another award-winning journalist, Maria Ressa. Ms. Ressa was CNN's bureau chief in Jakarta and Manila before she teamed up with 3 other women to set up an independent news site. Their site, Rappler.com, quickly became one of the leading online news portals in the Philippines, known for its hard-hitting stories about human rights abuses under the administration of President Rodrigo Duterte. Last year, Ms. Ressa was one of 4 journalists named as Time Magazine's Person of the Year for what Time called, quote, great risks in pursuit of greater truth. The government's response has been to arrest her and initiate a series of civil and criminal cases that expose her to a maximum sentence of 63 years in prison. The Maria Ressa case in the Philippines, like the Reuters case in Myanmar, exposes a cruel irony that I see time and time again in my work. Journalists who expose abuses face arrest, while those who commit the abuses do so with impunity. Crimes allegedly committed by the authorities in Myanmar and the Philippines are currently being examined by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Yet so far, it's only the reporters going to jail. Now you may think that these problems only affect people in far-off lands, but you would be wrong. These problems are global, and they exist even in countries that otherwise have a strong tradition of free speech. No region is untouched. For instance, many people don't know that journalists have been murdered because they are journalists, even in Europe, in places like Malta and Slovakia. Australia's Parliament just launched an inquiry into press freedom after police raided Sydney headquarters of the ABC News channel, alleging that classified material was used in a report on killings by Australian forces in Afghanistan. In this country, 2 journalists were recently arrested for using a leaked ombudsman report in a documentary alleging police collusion in a murder in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. And the indictment against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has alarmed journalists at newspapers around the world, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the Guardian, because, as the editor of the Washington Post has put it, it, quote, criminalizes common practices in journalism that have long served the public interest. With many governments also insulting and threatening journalists and seeking to throttle media organizations through strict controls on ownership, licensing, and online activity, we have reached the point where there are few places in the world where journalists are not surveilled, harassed, disenfranchised, or subject to self-censorship. I should not need to explain to this audience why this is so consequential. In the last story that Amal Clooney wrote in the Washington Post, he lamented the fact that the vast majority of countries in the Arab world lack a free press, and that as a result, millions of Arabs are either uninformed or misinformed. This is true in other parts of the world as well, meaning democracy cannot work, meaning progress is restrained or thwarted, and human rights abuse, any abuse, can occur in the dark. So it is clear that the challenges to media freedom are urgent, and they are global. But an international campaign like the one being launched today can only bring about positive change if governments are willing to pay more than lip service to the ideal of media freedom. All governments say they support press freedom. The right is even enshrined in North Korea's constitution. What matters is enforcement of that right, and enforcement depends on states. So I am grateful to the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, and to Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland for bringing us all here today. I I'm grateful for their assistance in cases where I have represented detained journalists. And I'm grateful that today they are shining a light on the importance of media freedom around the world. But my message to all the ministers who are here is that signing pledges and making speeches is not enough. They must make sure that their laws respect media freedom and that their police, prosecutors, judges and citizens do the same. States must ensure that when a journalist is attacked, this crime is investigated and that those responsible are held to account. States should ensure that when a journalist is detained, they have access to legal counsel and open monitoring of their trial. States can provide more robust consular assistance when their nationals are arrested abroad for their reporting. They can provide special visas for persecuted journalists who need asylum, and they can impose targeted sanctions and other penalties on states that try to silence critical speech by detaining or killing journalists. States can make a concrete commitment today by contributing to the Global Media Defense Fund that has been established to help journalists access legal assistance and training. And I hope they will support the work of the new independent international legal panel that I will introduce tomorrow. Recent reports suggest that today, only 1 in 10 people in the world lives in a country with a free press. And today, the country of James Madison has a leader who vilifies the media, making honest journalists all over the world more vulnerable to abuse. With authoritarianism, isolationism, and nationalism gaining ground, the relevance of international institutions and respect for international norms are seriously in question. I believe it is this crisis of the international rule of law that makes this initiative compelling. It is compelling not because the international system works, but because it is broken. So we need groups of like-minded states that will move forward on one issue, even if they are paralyzed on others. That is why I am supporting this campaign, and I look forward to working with many of you to see what we can achieve.
Okay, you may have noticed Amal is a little taller than I am. Thank you very much, Amal. That was really vivid and inspiring. I think we all appreciated those remarks. Our next speaker is one of the people doing the kind of difficult and dangerous and important work that Amal has been describing. She is an investigative reporter from Venezuela and the co-founder of the independent news website Efecto Cocoyo. She was awarded the 2018 International Press Freedom Award from the Committee to Protect Journalists and was spotlighted in the 2018 edition of Time Person of the Year. So please join me in welcoming Luis Meli Reyes. Please.
Good evening. I am from Venezuela. I am graduate. I am a journalist working in a hostile environment. I am looking to be here to tell our story. In 1999, in Venezuela, a very charismatic leader pointed to a group of journalists and told to his audience, "They are my enemies." 20 years later, the independent media industry in Venezuela has been devastated. The media landscape in Venezuela has changed dramatically because of a confluence of economic crisis, government repression, and company acquisition. Plus, independent newspapers are having trouble getting enough paper because it is controlled by the government. In the last 5 years, 66 of newspapers have been closed. Only 7 years ago, the daily newspaper, when I was an editor, had a staff of hundreds of journalists. It doesn't exist anymore. More than a dozen journalists, including myself, have had to leave the country because of threats, attacks, and arrests. Political changes and violence have marked my life as a journalist. But 2017 was different. Reported covered the protests wearing helmets, bulletproof vests, and gas masks. My young friend saw protesters their age died, fighting for freedom. These young journalists have never known total freedom, but yet they defend it with their work. Covering protests in Venezuela can easily often lead to jail or exile. Doing investigative report in my country often lead to jail or exile. My friends, Edward, Joseph, Roberto, and Alfredo, all award-winning journalists from Amal Info, are now forced to live outside the country because of their reporting. And it's not just in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, Mexico, Honduras, and even Brazil, journalists are under attack. In Mexico, a journalist is killed every month on average, and hundreds more have been displaced. They have to leave their homes because they have been attacked, kidnapped, or threatened with being killed. In Nicaragua, journalists such as Carlos Chamorro have had to leave the country after government raised on their offices. And in Brazil, the president is also telling audiences that journalists are the enemy. Today, I have the honor and responsibility to be here, and I'm lucky enough to tell you this story. But you should know that it was difficult for me to travel to London because my passport had run out of page, like many other journalists from Venezuela. I can't get a new passport for my country, and that makes it impossible to travel freely. This is another way that the government tried to control journalists. Despite the critical situation, many Venezuelan journalists have decided not to stay quiet and just watch our funeral happen. These words are from Edward Schaffenberg, who inspired me to co-found the investigative news site Efecto Populo with my partners, two brave journalists, Laura Wenfer and Josefina Ruggiero. Our name, Efecto Populo, in English translates to the firefly effect. We believe that in these darkest moments, tiny spark of information can make an entire nation. Efecto Populo is an independent Venezuelan media platform that delivers critical reporting and hard-hitting investigation in an era of growing limitations on citizens' ability to stay informed. Our team combines the energy of young writers with the experience of award-winning veteran journalists to cover stories that are increasingly being ignored by traditional media. These issues include the humanitarian crisis, the migration of millions of Venezuelans, and the search for justice by relatives and victims of human rights violations. Because of the censorship, many journalists turn to the internet, and fields allow new voices to find an online audience. But now, the government has begun to block us online, closing the only window that we have left. In her recent report of the violation of human rights in Venezuela, the United Nations had administered Mr. Michelle Bachelet called on the Venezuelan government access to the internet and social network, including news website. The journalists who continue to work in Venezuela on our team, Efecto Populo, and others, are forced to work in a difficult condition. They are going back in blackouts, and there is not enough petrol, food, and other basic necessities, such as medicine, for example. Most Venezuelan journalists receive less than $100 per month as a salary. And in the midst of the worst economic crisis in the region, if you can ever find a product that you need, hyperinflation makes them too expensive. People ask me why Venezuelan journalists are still working in the country. I always say that the best answer to the attack is doing more and better journalism. If everyone leaves the country, who is going to tell the story of of a nation that is living an humanitarian emergency? Who is going to tell the story of a country who is resisting and fighting to get back for democracy? I can't go home right now, but I hope to go back soon. And I am so proud to the journalists who are still able to work there despite the challenge. If you share our passion for journalism, you have to recognize that journalists are very vulnerable. We need your help to take action, to punish people who believe that they can kill a journalist with impunity. We need the support of people who believe in freedom of speech. 20 years ago in Venezuela, we couldn't have believed that the free press would be in danger of extinction. I come from the future, and I'm sorry to say that our experience is easily replicable in many other countries. The formula to reduce journalists is simple and effective, and government in many countries are getting better at destroying the free press. As they do, they also destroy democracy. I want to end by thanking the many organizations that help journalists around the world. Groups like CPJ that are working to protect us, Luminate that provide financial and consulting support, Open Society Foundation and the program on independent journalists, Simbra Media, which provide sustainability support, research and training journalists, entrepreneurs in Latin America. And in Venezuela, we have to say thank you to the work of IPIS, Espacio Público, y Sindicato Nacional de Trabajadores de la Prensa. I have to say thank you also to my friend from Colombia. Your journalists from Colombia have been supported with Venezuelan journalists in a way that we have written very well. Finally, I want to recognize the 33 Press Freedom and Media Development Organization who met in London yesterday to call on all participating states to ensure the protection and safety of all journalists and media workers. They demand, and I support that, they release all imprisoned journalists, stop killing, attacking, and denigrating journalists, investigate and prosecute all murders of journalists. Today, our few countries left in the world, where journalists are really free to work. I would like to start a petition to appeal to governments around the world to create a special visa for journalists who need a safe place to go. When a journalist is killed, as has happened in Mexico, when a journalist is put in jail, as is happening in Nicaragua, when a journalist had to go into exile, as is happening to me and my friends in Venezuela, not only do they silence those journalists, they silence many others and leave our society in the dark. Thank you very much.
I especially was struck by people getting together and saying, we're not going to stay quiet and watch over our people. I like that fighting spirit. We're going to hear from another remarkable person now. Our next speaker, Anas Arumea Anas, is an investigative journalist and a graduate of the Ghana Institute of Journalism who studied law at the University of Ghana. Mr. Anas focuses on issues of human rights and corruption in Ghana and sub-Saharan Africa. He has won many awards for journalism and advocating against slavery, and was named one of Foreign Policy Magazine's 2015 leading global thinkers. Anas.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I a military barracks. And it happened to be very interesting times in Ghanaian history, because I saw it, how both the military and civil society tried to consolidate media freedom. Then I left the barracks and joined my newspaper, the New Crusading Time, and learned under the formidable and energetic hands of Abdel-Malik Kwetuma, the likes of the Kwesi Prats, Kofi Kumsins, Audrey Gajepo, and many others. We learned to fight for media freedom. We learned to ensure and to consolidate the democracy that Ghana had. Moving on, I grew up and then became partners with Al Jazeera, BBC, many other international channels. Then I realized that my notion of what media freedom is about was changing. What was it? Me and my team at the BBC, Africa Eye, we had a project. We had a very important story to tell in Malawi. So we got together. It was about human harvest. We took all the security gadgets that we needed, went there. But that story still remains the most dangerous story that I have ever taken part in. It was a very simple operation that evening, but it didn't end well. Now, we had been able to film undercover the activities of these people who were killing. We had all of it. And one of them said we should go by a village, and then he's going to show us where, when they kill, where they bury the bodies. So we went there. Whilst filming, a community member raised an alarm that they've seen some people there. 1 led to 2, 3 led to 4, and over 100, 200, 300 people had gathered there. The killers had disappeared. We were left there. Who are you? We are from the BBC. That wouldn't stop them. They attacked us. Those who had knives used it on us. Those who had stones hit us with it. It was a heavy struggle to live. Eventually, we go to the chief's palace. The chief ordered them to stop. They tried to burn the chief's house and forcibly wanted to take us out and kill us. When we got back, the police intervened and then we got our freedom. I asked myself, why would this be happening? So I insisted with my colleagues that, look, we've got to go back to that community and find When you can attest and do fact check of this story, and yet a powerful president will look at it and just declare it, it's fake news, there is an issue. You see, the fake news that you sit in your little corner in your country and talk about, someone is also in another continent misinterpreting what you have said. You say fake news. He has misinterpreted it to mean that kill them all. So he goes after the journalists and kills them. After killing the journalists, the politician will be next. Thank you very much.
And now the pièce de résistance. We're going to hear from my co-host and really our host today, the person who had the great idea of organizing this conference, which we really hope is going to become an annual event and the beginning of a real collective effort by like-minded countries. The Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, Jeremy.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United Kingdom and our co-host, the Government of Canada, I am delighted to welcome you to this conference, and thank you, Chrystia, for your great support and enthusiasm for doing this conference and hopefully hosting one in Canada next year. Just 2 months ago, on the 16th of May, a 28-year-old Mexican reporter called Francisco Romero Diaz got a call before dawn about an incident in a nightclub in Playa del Carmen. Romero specialized in exposing organized crime. He responded as any good journalist should by getting to the scene as quickly as possible. In fact, he was probably walking into a trap. As he arrived, Romero was ambushed and shot dead. He would have known the risks that he was taking. In the previous 2 months, he'd been detained by the police, allegedly for refusing to pay a bribe, and abducted by armed men. He'd been called anonymously by someone threatening to throw him off a bridge and claiming to know where his son went to school. And yet, despite every act of intimidation and harassment, Romero pressed on with reporting for the newspaper Quintana Roo and running a website focused on organized crime. He was the 6th journalist to be shot in Mexico this year. And then just 1 month ago, a 7th, Norma Sarabia, was shot dead in Tabasco State. Across the world, 99 journalists were killed last year, more than twice as many as a decade earlier, and another 348 were locked up by governments. Few perpetrators of these crimes are ever held to account. Indeed, after 11 years, of the 46 journalists who suffered violent deaths in 2008, only 8 cases have been resolved. Which is why our conference and this global campaign are so important. Our challenge is to honour the memory of Francisco Romero Diaz and others like him by protecting journalists and championing their work as a vital pillar of a free society. My friend Chrystia, as she said herself, a former journalist, and I are the first foreign ministers to convene an international conference on this subject. And as Chrystia said, we want this to become an annual event all over the world. And what is exciting amidst this bleak news is that we're joined today by delegations from over 100 countries, including 60 ministers, and more than 1,500 journalists, academics and campaigners. Never before have so many countries come together in this cause. And today we send a resounding message that media freedom is not a Western value, but a universal value. At its best, a free media both protects society from the abuse of power and helps release the full potential of a nation. In 1887, the historian and politician Lord Acton wrote his famous words, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." The strongest safeguard against the dark side of power is accountability and scrutiny. And few institutions fulfill that role more effectively than a free media. Real accountability doesn't emerge from the selective and theatrical crackdowns on corruption mounted by authoritarian states, which mysteriously eliminate political opponents whilst leaving the biggest offenders untouched. Real accountability comes from the risk of exposure by a media that cannot be controlled or suborned. And the evidence for this is very clear. Of the 10 cleanest countries in the world, as ranked by Transparency International, 7 are also in the top 10 of the World Press Freedom Index. Meanwhile, of the 10 most corrupt countries, 4 are in the bottom 10 for media freedom. Now, powerful people value their reputations. So the sunlight of transparency is the greatest deterrent to wrongdoing. I'm a politician, and like many members of my profession, I don't always enjoy reading what the media says about me. Indeed, a politician who stands up for journalists might occasionally feel like a turkey voting for Christmas. And of course, I need to say, maybe my only chance, newspapers also make mistakes. Journalists are not immune from the temptations of hyperbole or excess. But for those of us who are sometimes on the receiving end of criticism, we should also reflect on the wisdom of Nelson Mandela, when he said, "The media are a mirror through which we see ourselves and others perceive us, warts, blemishes and all. Such criticism can only help us to grow, by calling attention to those of our actions and omissions which do not measure up to our people's expectations." So if we're wise, we politicians will treat the media as a critical friend. Our officials might tell us what we want to hear, the media tell us what we need to hear, providing unvarnished reality whether we wish it or not. But a free media does more than just criticise failure and deter wrongdoing. It also nurtures and nourishes the progress of ideas. Throughout history, humanity has achieved its swiftest progress when we've allowed ideas to be freely debated, tested, and challenged. No discovery was ever achieved and no invention perfected by the suffocating tools of suppression or censorship. Open exchange of ideas through a free media allows the genius of a society to breathe, releasing the originality and creativity of the entire population. As the great thinker John Stuart Mill wrote, "The peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is that it is robbing the human race. If the opinion is right, they're deprived of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth. If it's wrong, they lose what is almost as great a benefit, the clearer perception and livelier impression of truth produced by its collision with error." Societies which embrace free debate make a disproportionate contribution to the advance of human knowledge. The 10 nations with the freest media in the world have produced 120 Nobel laureates between them, 3 times as many as Russia and China combined. Norway, with only 5 million people, has won 13 Nobel Prizes. And with great respect to my Norwegian friends, Norwegians are no more pioneering or inventive than anyone else. They flourished because their open society and free media, ranked the freest in the world, have created the very best setting for their talents to thrive. In other countries, life is tougher, but journalists are succeeding against the odds. In Venezuela, we just heard from Luz Nela Reyes, who has defied the Maduro regime by co-founding her independent news website, Efecto Cocuyo. In Kazakhstan, Gulnara Bakanova runs the website Holonews, which exposed how fish stocks in the Ural River have been devastated by poisoning. In Peru, Gustavo Goriti of IDL Reporteros has brought to light a series of corruption scandals involving business, the government, and the judiciary. But sadly, in many countries, the situation continues to deteriorate. In China, automated censorship and the Great Firewall block access to thousands of news websites, with millions of people employed to censor content, fake social media posts, and manipulate online debate. The first person to establish a website in China focused on human rights was an activist called Huang Qi. He was jailed in 2016, and nothing has been heard from him since a secret trial in January, though he's in poor health. And we've raised the case with the Chinese authorities, and I urge them again to disclose Huang Qi's fate and provide the medical care he needs. In Vietnam, Tran Thi Nga produced video evidence of police brutality, only to get a 9-year prison sentence in 2017. So again today I call on the Vietnamese authorities to release her. In a world where Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered inside a Saudi diplomatic property, a talented young journalist Lyra McKee was shot dead by dissident Republicans in Northern Ireland, it would be easy to succumb to fatalism, but we must resist that. Because if we act together, we can shine a spotlight on abuses and impose a diplomatic price on those who'd harm journalists or lock them up for doing their jobs. So today I want to announce 5 practical steps the British government will take alongside our partners. Firstly, we'll join other governments to establish a new global media defence fund to be administered by UNESCO. This will take forward the UN Plan of Action on the safety of journalists. Among the aims will be to help fund legal advice for journalists and safety training for those venturing into conflict zones. Britain will provide £3 million to the fund over the next 5 years, and we invite others to contribute. Secondly, we'll establish an international task force to help governments deliver their commitments on media freedom, including by developing national action plans. Every year at the UN General Assembly, we'll meet to review progress of the task force, commending those countries where media freedom is getting better and agreeing what should be done when it's not. Thirdly, my special envoy, Amal Clooney, has convened a panel of experts to advise countries on how to strengthen the legal protection of journalists, and I'd encourage all governments to draw on the advice of that panel and respond to its recommendations. For our part, the British government will ensure that whenever we propose or amend a law, we will consider the potential impact on press freedom. And earlier today, my colleague Minister Harriet Baldwin announced that our Department for International Development will spend up to £15 million on new programmes to promote media freedom across the world. Fourthly, Chrystia, Freeland and I will bring together a contact group of like-minded countries to lobby in unison where media freedom comes under attack. Our aim is for this to be a rapid response mechanism, helping foreign ministers and ambassadors to react as one when abuses take place. And finally, I invite every country represented here to sign the Global Pledge on Media Freedom, resolving that we'll work together as a coalition to promote this cause and meet again next year. Colleagues, the struggle for media freedom is being waged day after day, not in conference centres like this, but by independent journalists in authoritarian states. by vigilant bloggers who expose corruption, and by courageous activists who publish the evidence of human rights abuses. There is no place for neutrality in this struggle. We are on the side of those who seek to report the truth and bring the facts to light. We stand against those who suppress or censor or exact revenge. After the killing of Francisco Romero Diaz, his newspaper carried the headline, "Pain, Fear and Impotence," and declared the voice of a journalist has been silenced. In the end, we all face a choice. Ignore the threats, and we tolerate the stifling of independent voices and the dangers of unaccountable power. But defend our values, and nations will flourish from the free exchange of ideas. By coming to this conference, each and every one of the thousands of people here has made that choice. We pledge to do what it takes and no less to ensure that instead of being silenced, the plural and varied voices of a free media are nurtured and encouraged as the most important contribution to the open societies that are the foundation of human progress. Thank you very much.
That was very inspiring, Jeremy. What a clarion call to action. Thank you. And I also appreciated the moment of raw self-reflection in Turkey's voting for Christmas line. I saw a lot of sympathy flitting across the faces of fellow politicians. Last of all, and joining us from the floor, it's my pleasure to invite Australia's Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister for Women, our colleague Chrystia, to make a few comments. Minister, please.
Thank you very much, Chrystia. And firstly, let me acknowledge both you and Jeremy, Canada and the United Kingdom, for your leadership and your